back on the air after the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and we'll have a related story coming up on CNN Student News. I'm Carl Azus. First up, most of the international sanctions, penalties, were removed from Iran over the weekend. It's part of the nuclear deal led by the Obama administration and agreed to last year. It'll be a major boost to Iran's economy, and it coincided with a United Nations report that said Iran is doing its part to restrict its controversial nuclear program, though critics have said Iran will be a nuclear power in 15 years. Shortly afterward, an exchange of prisoners was announced between the U.S. and Iran. American officials say secret negotiations had been going on for more than a year. The result? The U.S. released 7 men who'd either been convicted or accused of illegally exporting electronics, satellite services, or military equipment to Iran. In exchange, Iran released 4 Americans, a Christian pastor, a journalist, a Marine veteran, and another man who decided to stay in Iran. That country also released a 5th American, a student, separately from the swap. These releases were not part of the nuclear deal. The White House says the deal accelerated the exchange, but critics said the Americans' release should have been negotiated into the original deal, not part of a separate swap. For the roll call, our producers have chosen 3 from the 1,600 plus requests we got on Friday's transcript. Here they are. From Daejeon, South Korea, hello to everyone watching at Daejeon Foreign Language High School. It's great to see you this Tuesday. From Cape and Bridge, West Virginia, we've got the Bobcats. Cape and Bridge Middle School is on the roll. And in Hot Springs, Arkansas, we present the Rams. Hello to Lakeside High School. In the U.S., the third Monday in January is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Since the 1980s, it's been a federal holiday when government workers and many students have the day off. But event organizers stress that it should be a day on, a day of service when Americans are encouraged to volunteer and work toward improving their communities. Dr. King was the most influential African-American civil rights leader in the 1960s. After his assassination in 1968, cities named streets after him, and today there are estimated to be about 900 streets bearing his name in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. They stand as symbols, some in line with Dr. King's dream, some depicting what has yet to be achieved.
There's an American nightmare that's going on up and down King Drive.
When a person say, hey, meet me down on Martin Luther King Street, you know most likely it's going to be a dangerous environment.
As we stand here today, we're half a century away from the time that Martin Luther King came to Chicago to desegregate Chicago, and we face a lot of the same challenges today.
But I want to remind you today that we are not free in Chicago, in New York.
He came here to talk about the ghettos that we were living in. He came and he lived on the west side of Chicago to demonstrate his commitment to breaking that cycle of poverty that had been ensconced and entrenched in Chicago.
You see a very short summary of the black experience as you travel King Drive in Chicago. You'll see a progression of depression.
We helped create another organization called Southside Critical Mass. That ride starts here at Cole Park on King Drive. When we started that ride, there were people who said, oh, y'all gonna meet at night?
On the south side?
On the south side and ride bikes? I mean, there were people who were fearful. We know our neighborhoods are safer than the perception and the narrative tells us they are. It doesn't mean we're naive about violence in our neighborhoods. We ride to reduce violence.
Dr. King stood for unity. Dr. King stood for peace and justice, as well as economics. So to have such a negative stigma to be placed on the streets is kind of like a slap in the face to Dr. King's legacy. And so we're out to change that. We want to make people, when they get off the airplane, say, hey, I want to go to Martin Luther King. There's a nice restaurant. There's a nice jazz spot that we can go to.
MLK Boulevard starts down around Bay Street or around the river, and traveling south, you'll see from the river coming back very nice bustling businesses and cultural spots as you come up. And then somewhere around Gwinnett Street, you start seeing just, it doesn't look as nice as it does the closer you are to town. Several neighborhoods, there are some housing projects up that way.
I think people do feel that there's an economic divide there. See a lot more construction, a lot more investment in the northern part than you do in the southern part.
It was once a thriving street. Now, one thing that is happening, or has happened that's good, is the city has made some efforts to rectify that. Just to have the street and to see the name should spark something within all of us. He fought for great things, and if we find it in a depressed area, then it reminds us that there's a long way to go. And if we find it in a great area, that reminds us that yes, what he did was a great thing, and that we have made some strides forward.
Next, rockets. They're great at going one direction, up, not so great at landing. Model rockets can descend softly using a parachute, but what about the massive kind that go into space? In November, a private company called Blue Origin managed to launch and then land a rocket upright. A competitor named SpaceX has seen up and down results from its attempts.
And a valiant attempt, but ultimately a failure for SpaceX. The private space company tried to land this rocket on an unmanned platform in the Pacific Ocean. It toppled over, it exploded after it looked like it got some solid footing there. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk said ice buildup may have been the problem. The rocket had successfully put a weather satellite into low orbit. The company has been trying and trying to bring those rockets back safely, land them on platforms in the ocean so they can use them once again.
In 2012, a ranch owner in Argentina got in touch with a museum and said he found some fossils. Scientists believe they belong to Titanosaur. Haven't heard of that? That's because it's new, or at least newly discovered. By the name, you can figure it's big. And though the real fossils were too heavy to set up at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, some fiberglass models give you a sense of Titanosaur's size. Good thing it probably ate plants.
This animal's only been out of the ground for, a little less than a year, really. This animal is so new, it doesn't even have an official species name yet. It's one of the sort of traditional dinosaurs that has like a big body, a long tail, and a long neck, and some familiar relatives of it would be the, what they call Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus and that sort of thing, except that it's much, much bigger. New technologies were used on this, where the bones were actually like laser scanned, a rapid prototype from the laser scan. This went from concept to completely done in about 9 months. That, of course, doesn't include how long it took to excavate the specimen and to prepare the specimen. The real bones will be here in New York for 1 year before they're returned to the new renovated museum in Patagonia.
Well, just looking up at her could make your neck sore. Even if the museum had velocirapidly built her a titanic new room, she would have occupied the brunt of the space. Scientists had just never imagined something so big as herbivore. Yeah, dino puns. Helps to have a Tyrannosaurus. CNN Student News services again tomorrow.